In our community and beyond, there may come a time when we realize we were not prepared for the loss of a spouse or a partner. Suddenly, we are faced with questions like, where is that list of usernames and passwords, financial documents? Where are all of our equipment warranties, service agreements, insurance papers? Who services our cars, our HVAC and irrigation systems, and more? These situations can cause us to reflect on how we should have done some things differently, paid more attention, been better prepared. Those are the times when we say to ourselves, wish I would have known. Let's join our Wish I Would Have Known host, Denise Ertel.
In this episode of Wish I Would Have Known, we're going to focus on the things that people might encounter day-to-day finances problems after they've lost a spouse. Welcome, Nancy and Dee, and thank you for agreeing to share your experiences and your advice with us. Nancy, your husband Dennis died unexpectedly, and as much of a shock that must have been, you were prepared because you had planned ahead. Can you tell us what you had done together as a couple?
Well, as far as day-to-day financing, bill paying, that type of thing, I always assumed those responsibilities, but my husband a couple years ago had said, why don't you write down all the bank information, all the password information, user ID, so in case something happens to me, he'd be able to take over those responsibilities. So I had done that, and we had stored everything in lists and put it in a safe box. So when he passed, as far as bill paying, that type of thing, it was just normal. It was as usual for me. There was nothing unexpected.
So you didn't need to do anything high-tech. You just wrote it down and put it in.
That's all I did. You know, we did a little bit of abbreviation just to disguise in case some information was stolen, but we had the user IDs and the passwords listed and stored in a safe place.
Despite all that planning, were there any things that were unexpected and surprises that came up that you wish you would have known, you would have prepared for?
Relating to user IDs and passwords, unfortunately, what I didn't do is write down password and login information to some of his electronics, like his phone. So it was difficult to try to access some of his electronics.
So what did you do? How'd you resolve those things?
Well, I ended up going to the Apple store and having them scrub the phone. So it was a little inconvenient because what I was trying to do was access some of the information in his phone. And since I couldn't get into the phone, the only thing they could do for me was to scrub the phone. In a non-financial matter, the thing that affected me the most because of his sudden passing is, unfortunately, the only conversation we ever had in our married life regarding funeral or burial preferences was a comment my husband made probably about 10 years ago when he told me, I don't really care if you cremate me or casket bury me, just do something and put me in a veteran cemetery. When he passed unexpectedly, those were the decisions that I had to make. You know, you're trying to deal with the shock and everything else associated with somebody's sudden passing, and you're being asked all of a sudden, you know, where you would like the body to be delivered. You know, that was a little unfortunate that we hadn't pre-planned that type of thing.
Difficult conversations to have, but sounds like they're necessary.
If you can have those conversations and have things pre-planned, prepaid, you're that much better.
And Dee, you had a somewhat different situation in that your husband had a prolonged illness, but you had time to prepare. What are the types of things that you had done together?
We realized that we needed to get as many things, as many details worked out and documented during the time that we had together, so we could make decisions together. So we started out with a list, and we just tried to think of everything we could that we needed to do over the next few months. We contacted our attorney first. We wanted to make sure that all of our documents, even though we had all of our wills, power of attorney, everything prepared in advance, we wanted to make sure that first they were Tennessee legal, because we came from Pennsylvania, and we wanted to know if there was anything else that we needed to do. So next on the list was our financial planner. We contacted our financial planner. Whose accounts, what names, what are the beneficiaries, what do we need to do? So we were well prepared for that. We did the same. I called the Social Security office. We contacted our banks. Again, accounts whose names are on accounts. We did prepay and plan for cremation, burial, and we were very thankful for that. And we even planned his memorial service. He wanted to be a part of that in songs and speaking, and he wanted to prepare something that we could read from him. So that was very nice, and I was very appreciative that he had done that. We had this list. It was just on a yellow legal tablet. It had the name of, for example, the Social Security office, the telephone number, and then there was a place for notes. So as we called each of these places, knowing what to do, whether it was the life insurance company or whether it was a retirement account, we know who we spoke with and what they were recommending to do when he does die. Then we had another list of things that we needed to do the day of his passing, and it was exactly going through the list. We even had a who to contact list, who we wanted to know of his passing on that day, friends and family. So we had kind of like a chain, and again, we had telephone numbers. When that did happen, everyone was informed. Things worked out really well.
Despite all that planning, were there any surprises or things that you had to figure out on the spot?
No, we really didn't have any surprises. Once we got into it, we were pretty thorough. And the one thing that we did it with his family. I mean, we made a list of who gets what. His garage was his workshop. He had many tools, which I couldn't operate. There was lawn care equipment. He had a couple hunting rifles, just a lot of stuff. He met with his brothers and his daughter, and who wanted what. That was all documented. It really was quite helpful when you have all of it written down.
And have you done anything since with other members of your family to pass on information?
Yes, when my husband passed, we did have a will. I had that rewritten, and I notified my in-laws, specifically my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, and gave them the information so that if something happened to me, or when something happens to me, that information would be readily available.
Well, that's great advice. To close, let me just ask you, for people out there who may not have had these conversations or they're incomplete, what's kind of your closing advice? Dee, you had used a phrase that I thought was just kind of captured it all. Know everything about your house and your spouse.
You take things for granted. For example, he made sure he showed me how to program the irrigation system, how to turn the water off at the street, how to change the smoke alarm batteries, the circuit breaker box, things I knew nothing about. Do it with your family, and it's not a fun thing to do when you're facing death. It's never easy to talk about, but it's so traumatic in the end that anything you can do up front to help ease that. I'm so thankful that we did this, and I have now my list, which I've prepared for my family. They will just have a checkoff list of things that they'll need to do.
And Nancy, your closing comments. I know you had mentioned you had also gone through this with your father. You had to deal with his estate. So any other parting words of wisdom to people out there?
Well, yes, my father had passed a month before my husband. I was the executive of his estate, but my father was very specific on his wishes for burial and funeral. So when he passed, it was just a matter of a few phone calls. I hate to say painless, but it was very easy to do.
Took some of the burden off.
It took a whole lot of the emotional burden away, yes. Pre-planning as much as you can for funeral and burial is not pleasant, but it's worth it in the long run.
Well, thank you both very much for sharing this information with us. We hope this episode of Wish I Would Have Known has been informative and valuable to you, and it helps you to start having those difficult conversations and do some planning. Look for more episodes in this series of Wish I Would Have Known. We'll have other neighbors share their experiences and advice. Thank you for watching.